Most people's digital lives are a jumbled mess. Meetings in one app, tasks in another, journal entries somewhere else, habit tracker in a fourth place, and none of them connect. Every area is technically organized, but none of it talks to each other. And that's the part that actually matters. Because PKM isn't just about storing information, it's about connecting it. And you can't do that when your life is scattered across a dozen apps that were never designed to integrate with one another. Now, I spent years running exactly that kind of fragmented setup, and after trying just about every combination of tools that you can possibly imagine, I eventually moved my entire life into a single Obsidian vault. I run my entire life, journaling, personal retreats, multi-scale planning, habit tracking, Bible reading, task management, writing, all of it off of plain text files, all in one place. And in this video, I want to show you exactly how and why that works. Now, I have to address something up front here because some of you are already typing in the comments. Mike, you literally made a video saying don't try to make Obsidian do everything. And that's true. I still believe that. Just trying to use Obsidian for everything out of the box is still the wrong approach. So, why am I making the opposite argument in this video here? Because there's a real difference between cramming everything into Obsidian for the sake of it and running the things that actually benefit from being connected in the same place. That is a completely different conversation. When my journal entries link to the habits I'm trying to build, and those habits feed into the quarterly personal retreat where I reflect on whether they're actually creating the change I want to see, and that retreat shapes the projects that I commit to, and those projects produce the writing that I publish, and the writing pulls from the journal entries that I started with, that's not Obsidian being an everything app. That's the connections doing the heavy lifting, and the connections are the entire point. This is the PKM stack idea in action, which I've talked about in a few other videos. And if you want to dive deeper on that framework, I recommend this one, where I get into the importance of hiring each app for a specific job. Until you get clear on the jobs to be done in your PKM system, no app is going to be able to provide you the clarity that you're after. But when you are clear on the jobs to be done, then you can make an informed choice about the right apps for you and your workflow. And for most of the jobs that make up my life management system, the right tool for the job happens to be Obsidian. There are trade-offs from taking this approach, but because I'm clear on what I want out of my PKM system, it works. So let's actually look at what each of those jobs is. The first workflow I want to share here is the one I use every single day. If I had to pick just one workflow to use in Obsidian for the rest of my life, this is the one I would pick: journaling with daily questions. The daily questions idea comes from Marshall Goldsmith's book Triggers, and the key is just to ask yourself, did I do my best to, and then fill in the blank. The important difference here is that these prompts focus on the effort, not the result. And instead of using words to answer, you use a 10-point scale where 10 is great and 1 is terrible. Now, this idea immediately resonated with me when I first came across it, so I've applied this daily questions format to the areas that are important to me. I've tried this in several different systems, but Obsidian is the place that it's stuck. So every day I answer my daily questions and I rate myself in the following areas on a scale from 1 to 10. Did I do my best to grow spiritually? Did I do my best to love my wife? Did I do my best to love my kids? Did I do my best to be a good friend? Did I do my best to learn something? Did I do my best to create something? And did I do my best to exercise? Now, I find this form of journaling is much easier to do consistently because I don't have to judge myself based on what I got done or what I accomplished. So for example, if I'm training for a half marathon and I'm supposed to run like 12 miles, but I cut it short after 6, I might rate myself a 5. But if I'm getting over a cold and I just don't feel like going, but I end up doing a slow 3-mile run anyways, I might rate that a 10. Remember, that rating is based on the intention, not the outcome. As long as I did my best, I'm going to give myself a good score. Since you can't really control the results anyway, I believe it makes more sense to focus on the effort. Control what you can control and be intentional about your actions. That's the daily questions format in a nutshell. Now, the whole workflow uses a custom shortcut that I run at the end of the day that writes these values to the properties in my daily note. I have a whole video on that workflow linked in the description below if you want to dig deeper on how that's set up. I also use a quick add macro to log wins, gratitude, and journal entries, which again live in my daily note. So that means there are no separate journaling apps to remember to open. The daily note in Obsidian is phenomenal for journaling, and I love having all those entries and the values tied to those daily notes. Now here's where it gets interesting. Because the journal lives inside my vault, I can use my on this day basis query that again lives inside the daily note template that surfaces everything that I wrote about and captured a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, etc., all on the same day. And that is where journaling actually pays off for me. It's not the act of writing the entry, it's the act of bumping into your past self when you weren't expecting to and seeing how you've grown. So the takeaway here is this: don't journal to record the past. Journal to craft the future. Drop a marker that future you will find useful. Use your daily notes to capture what's important, to grade your effort, not your results. And keep it inside the same note that you're already opening every morning so it doesn't become yet another app that you forget to use. I've got a deeper dive on the daily questions setup in another video, and a separate one on the quick add macro that I used for the journal entries. Both are linked below this one. Okay, so that's the daily layer. Now let's zoom way out. Once a quarter, I take a full day off from regular work to do what I call a personal retreat. It is, without exaggeration, the single highest leverage day on my calendar, and the entire thing, every reflection, every plan, every decision, all lives inside of a single Obsidian note. The personal retreat process has a very specific format that I've honed over several years of doing these. So first, you review your life theme and your personal core values to see if they still resonate. Then you review your journal entries, which we just talked about. I've got queries that make this easy and a dashboard for the daily questions where I can spot trends. After that, you complete a Wheel of Life exercise where you rate your current happiness with the different areas of your life and you figure out which one needs some attention over the next 90 days. Next, there's a 2-part retrospective where you look back at the previous quarter before looking forward and making a list of things that you can potentially start, stop, and keep doing. From there, you set your intentions for the next quarter and you review your ideal week like I talked about in my last video to make sure that you have time set aside to consistently take action on the things that are important to you. Now you can do this whole thing on paper if you want. You don't need a special app. But if you do it in Obsidian, all your past personal retreats now become linkable. So when I'm sitting down to do this quarter's retreat, I can pull up the one from Q2 2024 right next to it, and I can instantly see whether I'm actually changing or just rewriting the same goals with slightly different wording every time. That feedback loop is brutal, but in the best possible way. You can't lie to yourself when your own writing from 2 years ago is staring you in the face. Now, I won't walk through the whole template here because I've got a dedicated video on my entire personal retreat workflow. It's actually one of the ones that I'm most proud of on my channel. But I do want you to understand this. You do not need to go to a cabin in the woods. What you need is a few hours, a single document, and the willingness to actually answer the hard questions about whether your life is going where you want it to go. The personal retreat is the bridge into the third workflow, which is what Cal Newport calls multi-scale planning. The idea here is that the real magic happens when you align your daily, weekly, and quarterly plans so that you are consistently taking action on the things that you decided were important when you did your personal retreat. So multi-scale planning actually begins above that by considering what Cal calls your roles and values. In my version of this, I start with my life theme, which is a personal mission statement that encapsulates what my life is all about, and my personal core values, which are both individual notes in my Obsidian vault that I review every 90 days when I do my personal retreat. But the important thing here is that you know what's important to you before you sit down to do any sort of planning. Now, once you get clear on that big picture stuff, then you can start planning using different timescales. So Cal recommends quarterly, weekly, and daily planning, which I think is a pretty good cadence. I personally do not do annual plans. I think that's too long and it's impossible to get right. So I do my personal retreat on a quarterly basis, and then I reevaluate my intentions every 90 days. In my opinion, that's the sweet spot because a quarter is long enough to make some significant progress, but it's also short enough that you have these built-in periods where you can reset and make adjustments if things don't go exactly according to plan. Now, each of these multi-scale planning layers lives in its own note, but they all connect using the periodic notes plugin. I have separate template files for my quarterly, weekly, and daily notes, but they all connect, and that's what helps me make sure that these plans all stay in alignment. Now, I've got another video on Cal Newport style multi-scale planning in Obsidian if you do want to go deeper on that. But the big takeaway here is that all those notes connect, so I can make sure that I am making consistent progress on those things that I said were important when I was away on my personal retreat setting those intentions. The fourth habit is habit tracking, and I want to be honest about my history with this one before I show you the system. I have tried just about every habit tracking app out there: Streaks, Habitify, Strides, Way of Life. I cycled through them roughly every 6 months for years, and not a single one stuck. Not because they were bad apps, but because the data lives somewhere completely separate from the place that I was actually doing the reflection that would tell me why I missed a day. So it really didn't stick for me until I moved my habit tracking into my daily note template file. Now it's just another 15 seconds as part of my journaling workflow at the end of every day. The setup itself is almost embarrassingly simple. There are checkbox properties inside my daily note for the habits that I'm tracking this season. I check them off as I do them or when I'm capturing my daily questions at the end of the day. That's the entire data entry layer. There's no app, no notifications, and no streak shame. That's the most important part. The interesting part though is what happens on top of the data that I track using those checkbox properties. I actually created a custom dashboard that uses DataView.js code snippets to create a comprehensive habit tracking view inside of my Obsidian Vault. The queries pull data from every daily note, looks at the checkbox properties, and then feeds the data into a dashboard that shows me streaks, gaps, and trends. So I get all the visualization that the dedicated habit tracking apps gave me, but the habit sits right next to the journal entry and it explains why I did or did not do that thing that day. That context is the difference between I missed 3 days in a row and I missed 3 days in a row because that's the week that my dad was in the hospital. Tracking honestly is more important than tracking perfectly. And a habit tracker is only useful if it actually changes your behavior. So putting it in the place that I already open every single morning is the single biggest behavior change lever that I have found. Again, I've got a full setup video for the Habit Canvas dashboard. It's linked below and the whole thing is available for free inside of my free Obsidian Starter Vault if you want to play around with it. You can download it at vault.practicalpkm.com. The next workflow I want to talk through is my daily Bible reading, which is not only the oldest habit that I track, it's also the workflow that taught me why I keep everything in one vault in the first place. Now, this is actually a pretty technical setup. And again, I've got a video below where I walk through how I do all of this. But for now, just understand that I actually have two types of Bible text in my vault: note as chapter and note as verse. So for the daily Bible reading that I build into my daily note template file, I use the note as chapter format. I have a separate file that has my chronological Bible reading plan with repeating tasks for each chapter assigned to the day that I'm supposed to read it, and that shows up in a custom callout in my daily note called Bible reading. When I open my daily note at the beginning of the day, I get that day's daily Bible reading there. But I also have each verse as its own atomic note, and that may sound extreme. And I'll tell you, when a friend wrote me a script years ago to break the King James Version into over 30,000 individual files, I genuinely wondered if I was doing something insane. But here is exactly why I wanted each verse as its own note. You see, I take sketch notes of every sermon that I hear. And when I bring those sketch notes into my vault, I link to each verse that was mentioned. Now I have all my sermon sketch notes going back to 2017, which means that I can now use the local graph to navigate my own cross-reference library inside of my Obsidian Vault. But I can also link other notes to those Bible verses as well. So maps of content, topical Bibles, my Bible college notes, all link back to those individual verses. I also added all my highlights from my paper Bible as note level tags, so I have multiple ways of finding verses based on subject or topic. And that cross-domain connection is something that no dedicated Bible app can give me, because no dedicated Bible app also holds my sermon notes, my book notes, and my journal. That's why everything lives in one vault, so it can all be connected. The Bible reading workflow is the cleanest example of this principle. And if you're a Bible reader, you've never tried it this way, you are sitting on top of one of the highest yield linking exercises Obsidian can do. So in addition to the video where I explain how I set all this up, I also have a link below to my own Bible resource files that you can download and drop into your own Obsidian Vault if you'd like. Okay, on to the workflow that probably generates the most "but what about" comments: task management. Again, I have used just about every dedicated task manager out there: OmniFocus, Todoist, Things, TickTick, Asana. Honestly, there are a ton of great task managers available today. They are all genuinely good apps, but for the kind of work that I do, Obsidian has replaced every single one of them. So the pieces of my task management workflow are pretty simple. I use the Obsidian Task plugin for inline tasks, and most of the time I capture them all to a master task list file that I never ever look at. If I want to add tasks to a project, I do that by adding a tag, and I use queries to surface the right tasks at the right time. For example, I have notes in my vault for people that I regularly meet with. Each person has their own people note with custom queries so I can quickly see what's relevant when I look at that person's note. If I want to make sure I remember to talk to someone about something, I can capture a task with a discuss tag and a tag for the person's name, and that task gets rolled up into a discuss query that I can reference before I go into a meeting with the individual. Same thing for projects. And I even have a task dashboard note that queries all of the tasks across my entire vault and surfaces what I should be looking at today. So this beats a dedicated task manager for my type of work for one reason. Every task is one click away from the context that explains why it exists in the first place. I'm not staring at a flat list of action items with no memory of why I added them. I'm seeing tasks attached to the projects they belong to, surrounded by my notes about that project, linked to the people who care about that project. Now I want to be honest because I made this point in another video and I think it bears repeating here. If your work involves location-based reminders, or you're managing 50 client projects with strict service level agreements, my system is probably terrible for you. That's completely fine. Your task system should be optimized for your work, not for mine. And one more important thing about this, Obsidian is where my tasks live, but it's not where my day actually gets executed. I use that task dashboard as a recommendation engine for the things that I should be considering right now. Then I select the tasks that I'm working on and I time block them. Different tools for different jobs. The computer is the brain, but the notebook is the list. And the so what here is simple. Tasks without context are just a list of guilt. Tasks living next to the project and the person they belong to changes the relationship that you have with your to-do list entirely. Okay, the last workflow, and the one that ties everything together, is writing. This is actually another type of task, but one where the text of what I'm writing exists in the note itself. So newsletters, YouTube scripts, course content, book notes, articles, every piece of writing that I publish starts and ends in Obsidian. The reason this matters is not that Obsidian has some magical writing experience that other apps can't match. The reason this matters is that the source material and the draft live in the same vault. So when I'm drafting a newsletter and I need that one quote from a book that I read in 2023, I don't have to leave the app, search a different system, copy, paste, and then reformat. I link directly to the book note, I embed the quote, and I keep writing. That's the goal, just keep writing. That sounds like a really small thing. It's not a really small thing. The friction between I had an idea I want to use and that idea actually ends up in a finished published piece is the thing that kills most people's writing, and the same vault writing fixes most of it. I also manage all of these writing projects by using Kanban boards inside of my Obsidian Vault. I have separate folders for each type of writing project and separate Kanban boards for each type. I use quick add macros to capture things to the backlog of the appropriate Kanban board. Then I drag that item from left to right as I work on it until eventually it gets published. The different types of writing projects each have their own template file with appropriate metadata, but the important thing for me is that all the writing happens in the note itself. That makes these tasks more like task notes as opposed to the inline tasks that I mentioned above. But it works great for these types of creative projects in my opinion. Now once I'm finished, I export the markdown to whatever the platform needs. The YouTube scripts get sent over to my video editor in Notion, the newsletter goes through Kit, and articles publish on Practical PKM, which runs on the Ghost platform. But the writing itself, from blank page to final draft, all happens in Obsidian. So those are the big ways that I use Obsidian to run my entire life. But there is another aspect to this which we need to discuss before we wrap up this video. Because all of this is in the same app, I can actually create some pretty cool dashboards to visualize things using DataView.js that tie it all together. I previously shared a video about how I use Claude to help me create these new journaling dashboards, and the link to that explainer video will be in the description below. But I've been building on that concept for a couple of other dashboards, including a projects dashboard and what I call my LifeOS dashboard. Now the LifeOS dashboard in particular is relevant for this video as it helps me make sure that I'm staying aligned with my vision and values. So here's what it looks like. In the upper left is a wheel of life graph that is dynamically generated from this quarter's personal retreat file. That means I don't have to change that code block. It will just automatically pull from the appropriate file based on the date and the naming convention of my personal retreat files in my Obsidian Vault. All the values are pulled from number properties in that personal retreat note, and they're displayed here. To the right of that is a combined daily questions widget, which shows the lines and averages of the daily questions properties it scrapes from my Obsidian Vault. So that means if I change the values in my daily notes template file, whatever it finds will actually show up here. I can toggle on or off the ones I want to see, select the time frame I want from the dropdown in the upper right, and the graph updates automatically. Next is a habits widget, which again is dynamically generated based on what it finds in the checkbox properties for my daily notes. It shows the current streak, the best streak, the longest break, completion percentage, and total completions for each habit it finds, and also shows which habits were completed or missed over the last several days. This dashboard also shows my life theme, the Memento Mori widget I have in my daily notes template, and quick links to capture journal entries or jump to the appropriate multi-scale planning note. All of this together in one place makes this note useful whenever I need to recalibrate and make sure that I'm moving towards my North Star. And because everything I do is dynamically generated, I don't have to touch a single line of code for this. It's all updated for me, which means it's always up to date. Okay, so that's the tour. Journaling, personal retreats, multi-scale planning, habits, Bible reading, tasks, writing, all running out of a single vault. And those dashboards connect everything so I can make sure that I am consistently moving in the right direction. Now that LifeOS dashboard has always been my dream. I've been building toward this ever since I started using Obsidian back in 2020. But those dashboards were not possible for me until recently. And that's really what brings this all together in my opinion, which is why I'm really excited to share that all of this is now available in one place inside of LifeHQ, my epic Obsidian vault with all these workflows pre-built and all these dashboards set up and ready to use. All you have to do is start generating your data and the dashboards will help you visualize it in real time. But I don't really want you to just blindly use what I built either. Yes, I want to help shorten the learning curve for you, but I also want you to be able to make it your own. So I've written over 60,000 words of documentation, included hundreds of screenshots, and explained exactly how I built every workflow so you can easily modify it to fit your needs. All of the plugins are pre-installed, all of the settings are pre-configured, but all the instructions are there to help you customize it and make it your own. So if you want to check it out, head over to lifehq.practicalpkm.com. But the big takeaway for this video really isn't about Obsidian at all. It's about reducing the number of seams in your digital life. Every time you context switch between apps, you pay a small tax, and over months and years, those small taxes compound. The fewer seams you have, the more compound interest your system earns. Now that doesn't mean you should just dump everything into one app though. You need to be clear about where the friction is in your own workflows. Get clear on what you're optimizing for and then build your workflows in a way that help you do more of what really matters. Also, I have to tell you, what I showed you in this video took me over 5 years to build. Please do not try to copy the whole thing in a weekend. That's a fantastic way to bounce off of Obsidian entirely. Pick one workflow, probably the daily journaling, because that's the foundation that everything else sits on top of. Get that working for 30 days and then layer the next one on top of it. Layer your workflows one at a time if you really want them to stick. And if you want to go faster by starting with some battle-tested PKM workflows, that's what LifeHQ is for. Again, you can find out more at lifehq.practicalpkm.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in another video.